I'll do it later.
Can I just take myself?
You can drive
Myself?
with her.
Oh, wait, can't? She's not.
Life starts, of course.
And Keegan's like, I hear his voice now, and I'm like, that's not Keegan. Come
Oh,
on.
it's definitely Keegan.
So strange.
Definitely.
Rowan hasn't changed as much. Like I saw him the other night. I'm like, okay, I still feel everything's fine. It's not a big deal.
They changed.
Yeah, like what I was just telling Andrea, like Tucker is he's right there. Like he's at the cusp of because Rowan's going into sixth grade,
Yeah.
seventh grade,
6, 9,
sixth grade.
12.
Yeah, so yeah, Rowan and Tucker are in the same. I keep wondering if they're in the same or if they're a year apart. But yeah, so they're both in the same boat. So they're right on the cusp of that too. So oh boy, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
All right,
I
all
had
right,
I
let's
had a
rock
good
and roll.
I had a good chat with a person that I know with the buckle,
Uh-huh.
and it sounded like the CrowdStrike thing hit them pretty hard.
Dude. Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of people that were really struggling over the last
Well,
week or
it
two.
sounds like their EDR, like
Uh-huh.
the reason they are used in these giant corporations is their EDR is the best, and those
Right.
people can afford to do it.
Right.
I was comparing it to if you look at you remember when BP had the
Yep.
oil leak?
When they had the oil explosion. Yeah.
You know, their stock just
Tanked.
went through the floor.
Yeah.
But if you looked at the sort of rebound of that, like
it shot way
it
up.
came back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when you're a multi-billion-dollar company,
You'll recover. It'll be fine.
yeah.
Yeah. So long as it doesn't bankrupt you, that's all that matters. I mean, so long as you can keep the doors open, it'll come back eventually. But
Yeah.
so have you read any more details on the CrowdStrike? Like what happened? Like exactly technically what happened to actually BSOD the Windows machines?
Well, other than, I mean, it was a driver, right? So the driver
Just a driver issue.
loaded something. It was probably a struct.
Okay.
So it was doing some offset into it, and that was a null. And when it's in the kernel, right, it just didn't have anything to catch it,
Yeah.
like a normal.
So it would
program.
jump to the null and it would just crash. Right. So there was no safety mechanisms to keep it operating. It would just crash on without any grace whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is interesting. So on the driver, they actually weren't jumping into like the operating system interrupt table because usually the operating system interrupt should be able to handle most of those things gracefully, right?
Well, normally, right, a segmentation fault, right, the
Because you're jumping
kernel
into
handles
places you're not
those.
supposed to be, right?
But
And
when
you
you're
were
in
in
the
the
kernel,
in the kernel. I got you. I see it because they're
mean-
actually at the kernel level that they messed up.
yeah, they probably, I mean, from a code standpoint, right, of course you should have guards against,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if the thing is null, you shouldn't be dereferencing it, you know, and
Right. Right. Which
when
is
I-
really,
when I
really
program
simple
right,
bit
I
of
try to
code.
make those assumptions.
Right. Right. Anytime you dereference anything, you should probably check to see if it's null. I mean, that's just a sort of a staple of coding, right? Especially in C, because C is notorious about not being very graceful about.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say, like, were they doing it in C? I don't
Right.
know.
Well, it's at the I don't. I guess I don't know. I made
Maybe
the
it was C++,
assumption they were.
but
Yeah. Some form of C. Probably
Yeah.
not very graceful in what it does and functionality that it has, but it's just interesting to me at the kernel level. When I think a lot of times people you would think that these are pros. They're really really good at what they do, and how something like this could happen at such a level. Just it means that there were a lot of different failures because it wasn't just the coding failure. It was testing validation failure. It was so many different failures at so many different levels that allows something this big to actually happen.
well, I think they
And I
were
think
missing,
that's what's interesting.
they were
about
missing
it.
some of the checks that they should have had.
Right, right. Which makes you wonder, like, what was the like? Why did they skip some of the? Did they have they never had the checks, or did they skip the checks? You know, in terms of a case study of the situation, like what necessitated it? Was it because the problem they were fixing was so urgent that they bypassed the tests? And then
I
they made
think
the
it was
problem
an urgent
worse,
problem,
or
but I think it was a normal urgent problem.
right,
So I I mean, deploying software at a scale like that is, of course, difficult.
Yeah, in and of itself.
And because they haven't had failures like that, right? They didn't have processes like the way that engineering
handle
typically
it.
evolves, right? Is through catastrophes.
Right. The space shuttle blowing up, then they react. Yeah.
Well, yeah. They react. I think the reactions, in a lot of places go slower, right, as you progress, right? So if you look at in the space race, do you think they were doing the same safety checks that they do now?
Nowadays.
Clearly not, right?
Mhm.
You have to learn from failures, and that's
Well,
where a lot of engineering has to learn from those.
and I think you're correct too. The more developed a system or a machine gets, the fewer and the further between the failures are, but also the more potent they may become. Right, because it's sort of logarithmic, right? You fix a boatload of issues, and then once you've fixed most of them, then you put it out. But any software that you put out is going to have bugs. Like, it's just the reality of the situation. There's no way you can have a bugless software.
Well, you can.
So what
it's
it
just
is
trivial, but
it's just it's trivial. But if you have some sort of non-trivial solution, it's going to have bugs in it, and that means you're going to have to find the bugs. And the only way to find the bugs is probably in that well-developed of an environment is probably catastrophic, right? It's going to be something big that just never was looked at.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it is one of those things that I think it happens. It's sort of like an airplane crash. It happens so few and far between for something like CrowdStrike that it is a big deal when it happens. So like for Cyberpunk, for instance, when they released that game, there were so many issues that it wasn't a big deal when a new issue was discovered because it was such a piece of crap software, right? But if you have pretty solid software, if there's a single issue, it becomes a big deal because everybody can sort of fixate on the single issue. It's sort of like SpaceX had a Falcon 9 failure recently, and everybody was able to fixate on it because they haven't had a failure for so long. It's sort of like an airplane crash, right? There's not a lot of airplane crashes. So every airplane crash that happens is notable, right? It is a big
it's also
deal.
almost always deadly, but there's...
It's almost 300 some odd people usually die, right? But it's one of those things like the CrowdStrike failure was probably a situation where, they probably haven't had any big failures for a while. So the longer you go without a failure, the higher the probability of finding a failure is, right? And the longer you go without a failure, the higher the probability of a non-trivial failure happening.
Code bases don't ever get smaller.
They get bigger.
They get bigger. They also tend to get more complex, right? Even when you re-architect things, right? Stuff.
Yeah. Well, and increased complexity increases flaw. Like that's just a reality of code. Like, well, it's a reality of engineering, right? So the whole best parts no part is true, because if you don't put a part in, or put a line of code in, or put a function in, or put a call in, if you don't need it, don't do it, because that line has a potential for bugs, and there may be a lot of bugs that you may not understand that could sort of come from that line of code, right? So the best line of code is no line of code is true. And, because complexity, like the mathematical nature of complexity, means that flaw increases with complexity. It's an unavoidable reality. And, when you think about code, if a code base is growing, it's sort of like when I look at code bases growing, it's like the house is getting bigger. There's more real estate for bugs, right? There's just more room for little critters to get into all of that code. Plus,
there's little conduits that go from one side to the other, and wormholes, I guess.
Wormholes, right? Well, and now think, like, if you have an extremely complex, extremely large code base, it's basically you're getting Daedalus's labyrinth is basically what you get, right? So you go into the code base and it's like a maze.
Yeah.
Where does this go? Where does it lead? Why does it lead here? I hit a dead end. Maybe that's not a dead end. And to thoroughly vet a maze consistently is really difficult, right? Like if you have a maze with 3 tunnels, of course you can vet that out. It's no big deal, piece of cake. But once it gets huge and there's a lot of real estate and a lot of little critters can live there, and nothing really connects.
To test, right? So like,
right, to fully test.
If you take your full state space, right, that's like however many bits you're using, 2 to the whatever. That's the number of combinations. And are you going to get through all of them? Probably not. Can you test pieces? Probably.
A lot of bits. Yeah, you're going to test, because like boundary cases and stuff, you're going to hit the pieces that have the highest probability of failing.
Yeah.
But just because you hit the pieces that have the highest probability of failing, all the other pieces, the probability of failing is not zero, right? It
Yeah.
may be lower probability, but the
Yeah.
probability is greater than zero, which means if it's greater than zero, then it could fail. And I think what ends up happening is you get these CrowdStrike sorts of things where you get the weird case where you have a low probability of failure, but the failure still happens. It's like the situation that, you know, it's like driving down a mountain and a rock literally falls on your car, like a giant boulder. Like the probability of a ginormous boulder falling on your car going down a mountainside is very low.
I had one when I was driving. I drove out. I was headed to Spokane, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
So I was driving, right? Got a phone call, said I wasn't needed. Okay, I'm in the middle of. I was in
Montana,
probably.
Yeah, Montana heading over.
So I was driving, and I'm like, oh, okay. So I take the phone call. I go. I get gas. Turn around. So I'm going back up the hill. And as I'm driving, I look in the median, and I literally see a tire rolling through the median. Ooh. And then I look in my rearview mirror, and my recollection is that it was probably 20 feet in the air. It was bouncing on my side of the road, right? And you talk about probability. Like, if I would have stopped for half a second longer at the rest stop, like, that was the difference between me being in an accident and not.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the crazy thing is, like, everything in that way is a game of probabilities, right? Like, in software especially, I mean, it is a game of probabilities, and you can't cover everything. Like, it's absolutely impossible to cover everything. Yeah. And that's probably where the thing that I wonder about the CrowdStrike bit is especially if they're doing something in C and they're referencing some sort of a piece in memory, why there wasn't a null check, right? Like, that seems like a fairly.
Yeah, but you can look at it and say, like, clearly, should they have done it? Yes, but
they must have made the assumption. It must have been a situation where
you're always
whatever struct,
when you're programming, right? You're always making assumptions.
Yeah. Like, right, they must have made the assumption that this particular struct will never be null.
Yeah.
In any circumstance. That must have been.
But again, right, that's, you know, when you watch, like, if you watch the Primeagen code, right, he talks about, okay, if that's true, then just assert that.
Right.
Like, you should
test it, trust but validate, right? Yeah.
I said, but it was probably Reagan.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Reagan. It was Dr. Matt Miller said, trust but verify. I'm going to put that on the record.
Trust. Yes. Well, he might have said it, but I
definitely
use it in coding all the time. Like,
right.
I trust that you're going to give me this thing, but I also want to go and verify that, like, that is the case. And then, right, at some point, right, something could get misused. Right. So I think, you know, if you're looking at coding recommendations, there should be additional checks, like sanity checks.
Yeah.
To
sanity
give yourself,
checks. Is this struct, are all the values in here actually not null? Like, is the struct itself not null, right? Like, let's go in and just do a check and make sure that it's good.
Yeah.
And honestly, you know, it depends on the size of the struct, but just scanning the struct for null is not a intensive operation.
Well, and you know, if you look at, you know, I remember when I was in grad school, we were talking about verification systems, right? So you could verify. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you look at a structure like maybe a linked list, right? You could go through and verify to a certain level that, like, the implementation is right. It covers all the base cases. It covers.
Right.
But when you looked at something like a binary tree, like, it was impossible, right? Because
can't do it. Yeah.
The number of combinations of, you know,
values in the binary search tree.
Yeah, like,
ridiculous.
does it have 2 children? Yes or no? Well, like, your structures all of a sudden becomes crazy. Like,
up.
And when you know, my company, we do family trees. They are trees. They have
trees.
Parents, and you have
which,
children.
by the way, they're more like roots, but it's okay. We'll call it a tree. Us computer science people are weird, but and I guess genetic people are weird too. We call it a tree even though it's upside down. But whatever, it's fine. Yeah.
I mean, mine goes either way, actually.
So you could actually arrange it like a tree.
A whole plant.
But it's not even. But it's even not like a tree. It's like a bush.
But it's got the leaves and it's got the roots. Yeah. Like, if you just start with the proband, you go up, it gets bigger. You go down, it gets bigger. It doesn't really grow much.
Okay, so it is more like a bush though, because it's not really a trunk. There's no linear. extension.
There is the
of a
proband.
trunk.
They are where the
That's where
where
the
the roots meet the
the
ground, where the
soil
leaves meet the ground.
where the leaves meet the ground. Right. It's like a lilac bush.
A
But no,
potato.
anytime I talk about trees with students, I always bring that up. We're CS people. We're weird. We think of things. If we see something that's like starts with one point here and then it goes out like this, we're like, oh, that's obviously a tree.
It's
Even
a
though
tree on the southern hemisphere.
it's an upside down tree. And they always giggle a little bit, but I like to actually point that out because, a lot of times if you're a non-CS person and someone says the word tree, you think, okay, it starts here and it sort of goes up and then it does that sort of a thing. But for us, the CS is like, no, nope, that's not the way this works.
And actually, if you look at an actual tree, right? Did you know that their roots tend to go out?
Very sideways. Yes. They're not actually very deep.
I always thought they were like, from what I understood, right? A tree was like symmetrical. It was like, well, it kind of goes up and like it goes
down.
sort of the same amount down, but it's actually more flat typically.
Yes. Yeah, generally. Well, even like you think about the redwoods. So like that's a great, interesting case. Okay, so a redwood tree is freakishly tall, very, 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 very large. But when you look at their root systems, they don't go down very deep. They have a tap root, right, that goes down pretty deep, but the roots spread out more horizontal than anything.
Yeah.
And so you ask the question like, okay, so then how do they stay together? Well, what ends up happening is they like intertwine with each other. And so when you look at a bunch of redwoods, the roots are so intermingled that if one starts to tip, it starts to pull on the roots of another one, which pulls on the roots of another, and it increases the friction of the very shallow roots so much that
you go and look at those trees, and it looked like somebody just took a post and went,
just shunk, stuck it down in the ground. And it's so crazy to me that the physics works, like, because I'm thinking the torque of I don't know, how tall are they? 200 feet?
Yeah, I mean they're fairly tall. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how tall they are. They're really tall. The torque on it, we'll say 100 feet, of that moving over, the wind pushing at the very top of that tree, the torque of a lever that's 100 feet long is
but it's also got a lot of mass. So I bet it moves a lot less than
other trees.
Yeah, but when I look at my trees outside, like when the wind is blowing, they're like
they're swaying a lot. Well, it's also a testament to the type of wood, right? Like the fact that wood it has rigidity, but it also has elasticity to it, so it does actually give and doesn't just pop. So, when you watch those trees,
otherwise it wouldn't work.
Otherwise it wouldn't work. Which is funny because eventually we figured that out with skyscrapers. Like, don't make them stiff. You got to let them move, right? Because they got to be able to sway. Otherwise they'll just pop and break. Because the leverage, like, I don't think a lot of people understand like the torque. I mean, could you imagine if there was a stiff skyscraper, the size of the Empire State Building that didn't move at all, the pressure at the very top would translate all the way down to the very bottom and would just pop it over. But the swaying acts like a spring, right? So it absorbs all that power through movement, so that then not much of that actually gets down to the base of the building. And that's what allows it to actually like do what it needs to do and not fall over. And you can go up to the viewing deck and not be afraid. Oh, well, we're going to tip over.
Well, I don't want to go up to the viewing deck anyway. But
you ever been up in a skyscraper before?
I have, but I don't like it.
Yeah. Which one did you go up in? Was it
I don't know. I've been in tall buildings.
In tall buildings, okay. I went up the Sears Tower, which I don't know what it is. Willis Tower? I think it's Willis Tower nowadays in Chicago.
Yeah.
Used to be the tallest building on the planet, which it's not even close anymore. And it's pretty surreal.
Those competitions are dumb anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
because
they count like antenna-y things, kind of.
Yes. Yeah, they put the antennas on the World Trade Centers to win it or whatever. And it's like, no, it needs to be the building. Like, just the building. Like the Burj Khalifa now being the tallest. I mean, I don't know. I like heights. I like being up high and stuff, but I don't know. That would make me nervous. Even me, like because how tall is the Burj Khalifa? Is it like a
I don't know.
half
They're
kilometer?
all too tall. Like I don't even care.
I'm curious about that now. That's my theme for the day. How tall is X?
5'11".
I gotta look it up because 2,000. Oh, good grief! 828 meters. Yeah, So
2,000 meters?
2,716, no, 828 meters, 2,000 feet,
Oh,
almost 3,000 feet. So, it's a kilometer being 1,000, so it's almost a kilometer, right? It's almost a kilometer.
I'm
That is
good.
ridiculous. I mean, ah,
Well, anyway, so I would guess, right? I'm not a financial advisor, but I would guess you could buy
buy some
CrowdStrike
CrowdStrike.
software when it hits
Yeah,
a low.
yeah.
Like I was looking at, if you look at the stock price over the past
Uh-huh. Yeah, you can see where it
6
started
months,
crashing.
right? I mean, it was running
Mm-hmm.
at almost $400,
Mm-hmm.
and now
And now
it's
we're at
sitting at
232. Yeah,
230.
yeah.
And I think it went down even more because the airline was gonna sue.
I bet. Yeah, yeah, because it shut them down. They lost a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna probably have to cut back on staff. They're gonna lose a lot of money, but I
Mhm.
think they're gonna go back up again. I'm
What's
not a
crazy is what's nuts about this is a year ago they were evaluated 160, 166 per stock. Like they're still up from last year
yeah.
by a considerable amount. But yeah, it is definitely one of those things like when you have a bad issue. Let's see, what was their high? Looks like yeah, almost 400 was their high. But
I think you're right. As long as they don't go sort of out of business.
yeah, well, they're I mean even at this point their year over year is still looking good. Their net income's still fine. It just depends on how long the slump lasts. I think that's ultimately where it's at.
Well,
We'll see.
how much out of their revenue, like or
Right,
their holdings,
right.
right? How much do
They're
they
yep,
have to pay out?
right.
I think
Because
there's still gonna be, you know, quite high, but
yeah,
we were also talking about the assassination attempt and
right.
how the false positives on that. Like you don't know, like how many times do they have false positives?
A
And
lot.
if you take that into account, right, you typically don't want to just have, oh well, you know, we shot 3 people because of false positive. Like
Hmm.
that doesn't make any
False,
sense.
man, dealing false positives and false negatives is so hard because if you like the type 1, type 2 errors are just ridiculous to balance, because if you go too far one direction, then you have an assassination
Well,
attempt.
it's
If you go
like,
too far
so
the other direction, you're shooting people for no reason,
if you have a really good test, right, a test that has a really high ratio of, like, your true positives are, so like a cancer test, right?
Hmm.
So even if you have a really high ratio of, like, our true positives are this
Right.
and our false positives are this, like, there was a thing, it had a very small number, right? So let's say like 1% are false positives or something like that, but
Right.
not a lot
Right.
of people test positive. It turns out if the test says you're positive, like, you got a 1 in 3 shot or something like that, or 2 in 3 shot of not
Right.
even having cancer,
Of not even having the
just
disease.
because of the
Right.
false positives.
Right. Right.
And I think that's the problem, is that a lot of that stuff is difficult for the average person to even understand.
To conceptualize.
Like,
Right.
people can't even understand the Monty Hall problem,
Right.
right? Where if you have, the reason it's hard is because there's only 3 doors. The easy
Right.
way to make that problem a lot easier. I can say it the same way to you, and you'll be like, oh, well, yeah. So let's say there are 100 doors, right?
Uh-huh.
One of them has, no, it's 2 has the prize. Is that right? Monty Hall.
I don't remember it exactly.
Monty Hall.
Pull it up.
Let's look. I think one of them has. Let's go with one of them, right? Because 2, it's a similar thing. So let's say one of them has the prize, right?
One of them has a prize. Okay.
100 doors.
100
One of them
doors,
has the
one price.
You're allowed to pick a door. You pick a door.
Uh-huh.
99, whatever. Doesn't matter.
99
Okay.
times out of 100, I am going to not get the prize.
I'm going to eliminate, so there's 100. I'm going to eliminate 98 of them that do not have the prize. Are you
That
going to
do
switch?
not have the prize. Duh.
Why? Because
Because
you've got a
probability
1 in
just
2
went-
shot
Yeah, it
versus
went up to 50%.
a 1 in
versus 1%.
99 shot.
Yeah. So it was like a 1%. Now it's a 50%.
But the reason
course,
Monty Hall
yeah.
is hard is because you started with like a 2/3 and they eliminate one of them that doesn't have it, and then like, do you want to switch? And you're like, well, I had a third shot.
Right. Like because most people look at it as I have 3 choices as opposed to 2 choices. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, 3 choices is better than 2 choices because 3
Well,
is greater
but
than
they say,
2.
well, I picked one, so like it's still a
Right.
third. But what
Right.
they don't understand is you have additional information.
Right. So always going with the reduced set is always better because the probability of choosing it goes up. No
Well,
matter
it's like,
what.
do you ever look at your forecast for like if it's gonna rain?
Yep. Absolutely. I do it all the time.
Does it drive you nuts to look at it?
It does. Yes, absolutely.
Like it drives me nuts because
Because
I
it's
look at
wrong.
it and it says, okay, at 6 o'clock there's an 80% chance. At 7 o'clock
Right.
there's a 70% chance.
Right.
60% chance. I'm like, so that means there's 100% chance. But no, that
Right.
is
Right.
not correct.
Right. It drives me nuts. The weather stuff always just drives me nuts, especially because the weather is meant to be consumed by normal people, and normal people have no idea what any of that means. Like,
Yeah.
what does an 80% chance of rain mean? Like, have you really stopped to think about what does an 80% chance of rain mean? I mean, how can you even put
80%
that
of the time
for,
there's rain out of this situation,
of this situation of these
high
weather
low,
conditions,
blah blah blah.
right? Having this particular front and meeting this and this.
We might have
temperature and
only
this
seen this
humidity.
situation 12 times, but out of this situation,
Right. Yes, or maybe we've seen the situation 2 times, but out of the situation, whatever, like it's just like a normal person that doesn't really think about the statistics behind that and the probabilities that they're playing with or the population of data are going to go, oh, well, they said it's 80%, so it's definitely going to rain. But it's like, well, but the sample size may be really small. And what happens when you have a set of conditions that is unlike anything you've ever seen? Then you have to like reduce the number of variables you're accounting for so that you can put it in the domain of something that you have seen that you don't, so that you don't have an a, percentage, right? Because there are situations where, it may not be the exact same as you've seen before, so you have to abstract it a little bit to try to get it to look like something else.
I saw another one, and it was like, so there's 2 bags, right? One of them has a $100 bill and a $1 bill. The other bag has a $100 bill and a $100 bill.
Mhm.
Okay, and they mix up the bags,
Yeah.
and they open the one up, and it's got a $100 bill. What is the likelihood that the other one is a $100 bill?
Right.
Another counterintuitive one, right? It's actually more likely that it's another $100 bill because you got the 2 combinations of the $200 bills.
Right.
You had situation 1 where it was in the first bag, but then you got 2 situations for the second one,
Right.
of which $100 bill you grabbed.
Well, because ultimately you're looking at $300 bills and one $1 bill.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about it. Like the better situation is they mix them all up and they pull out the $1 bill. Like that would be the best situation. I would love that kind of. It's like, hey, here's the dollar bill. Which one you want to choose?
What's
Like,
the,
well,
what's
I'm
the
gonna pick that one.
likelihood?
Yeah, like, what's the likelihood that the next one's going to be $100 bills? Well, that's 100%. Yeah. Well, in statistics, I think it just gets a lot of people. And so when I look at weather, because I'm not a weatherman, because I don't know meteorology, I don't know any of how the evaluations and the variables that take it. I opened up my fancy radar that has a nice little picture of clouds moving, and I'm like, look at that cloud. It looks like it's heading straight for us.
Yeah.
Now again, I'll
Until
also
the
look
cloud
at it and I'll go,
forms in Dawson County, and then
right.
you're
Or
like, oh.
what normally happens, so Andrea and I like to keep our house open. We love like the wind and everything. So a question that she asked me a lot, is it going to rain? Right? Because we don't want rain coming into the house. And what's amazing, and I should start actually keeping track because I'm a nerd. I open my radar and I look at the clouds and I see their movement and I determine, okay, that looks like it's going to hit us. So yes, I would love to see how wrong I am, because I think in general I'm wrong, because the clouds will die out
Yeah, and
Or
reappear
occasionally
different
they'll
clouds.
just randomly reappear,
Yeah.
like way closer or in a different direction, and the wind
But
changes.
see,
Like
the
it's
real
so
solution
bizarre.
to this, Adam, is that you put a little rain sensor,
And then automatically close
and
it.
when it gets wet,
Yeah,
it just closes your window.
just automatic. I just need to throw like a.
I would love that.
Arduino
Actually, I
thing.
would love that for my pickup. Like
That would be
100%.
sweet. Yes.
Because I would rather, when
okay.
it's really hot, I would rather have my
Have
windows
the windows
down.
cracked. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But then
Why
I'm
don't
like,
they
get
have?
in
Okay,
trouble when it
here's
rains.
here's a question. That's a trivial solution. They already have electric windows, right? They already have the motor attached. A rain sensor is very, very, very simple, and the logic behind that is also very, very, very simple. Why don't cars already have that? That's the question. Like it's such a simple thing. Like it's
If
so
only you had a
so
business, you could do these
Oh,
type of things.
I wish I could build cars. I'd love to build cars.
No,
but-
you like do a third-party add-on.
Yeah, like a simple third party, like you just attach it to
You
some
just
place on your
do
car.
F-150s, and then
Yeah, just Ford F-150s, and then you just have a little plug-in, and then it just plugs right in and rolls them right up, rolls them right down. Now I wonder what the security vulnerabilities of that would be.
well,
Could
it would
you,
go up. So
You would only have it as an up case. It wouldn't be a situation where if the rain stops, it cracks your windows again.
yeah, then you had a feedback loop to make sure it rolled
Yeah.
it down, and then they break the feedback.
But that it didn't roll down too far, and yeah, and then all of a sudden you have security implications, right? So it would have to only roll them up. You'd have to go back out and roll them.
I
back
mean,
down
come
again.
on, security is only, you know,
You would need to. You would also
we still
need
have
to put
lock
them
picks, right? Like,
right, but there's never 100% security ever. You would need to put the sensor on like the front of the car, so that you know you're going through a car wash, and you know the moment
well,
that
but
it
see,
hits it,
I think it'd only be when the vehicle's off, right? Like, is your
when it's
vehicle
off and parked. Yeah,
on? Like, you might have an override, like a little button.
yeah, little
Stop.
ride there. Yeah, please don't roll it up. Actually, I think honestly the use case is just having the vehicle off. That way you could, I mean, if you choose to have the windows down when it's raining, that's on you, right? Like that's your choice. It's
Yeah.
up to you whether you want to be doing that kind of a thing. But you know that wouldn't be bad. Then I just have to design it and find a third party manufacturer and make a few $100,000 and
Or,
Call it a day.
deter pigeons,
yeah, just annoy pigeons. I still think if we were to ever revamp the pigeon thing, we should use, instead of speakers, we should use pancake motors or like vibration motors.
Motors, yeah.
Like that would be so much better.
But you got to
The-
avoid those brown frequencies.
Yeah, avoid the brown frequency and avoid the. You'd have to figure out the resonant frequency of the building, because you could potentially run into the whole feedback loop of resonance through your like metal subframe that could cause it to fall down or something. Or like a bridge. Like I was talking to my brother about that idea, the pigeon idea. He said on bridges, and I think I told you this. Pigeons poop. They poop so much on bridges. They actually have to account for the weight of
Yeah.
the poop through the years on the bridge in their engineering when they build the bridge, because it's going to add such a significant amount of mass.
It's a load. It's a load. Load you got to bear.
It's a load of loads, right? It's what it is. And I was telling him, I was like, well, what happens like if you had a pigeon, deterrence mechanism? He'd be like, oh, every bridge would have one. Every bridge everywhere would have one.
Every new bridge, yeah.
Every new bridge, right? Well, and they could put it on old bridges if they wanted to put it on old
Yeah,
bridges.
but that doesn't mitigate the load issue.
Well, they'd have to go up and clean it before they,
True.
But the key and that's when I started thinking about it. He's like, you just have to make sure that it doesn't resonate at the resonance frequency of the bridge, and then you end up with another Tacoma Downs situation where the bridge is like vibrating like a stinking guitar string, right? And
Yeah, and
blows up. And
when I watched that video, like, I assumed that bridge was quite high, and I drove across it, and it's not near as high as I imagined.
the
Tacoma Narrows,
replacement, yeah. I thought it looked very high. But I've never driven across that.
Yeah, I think we drove across it, and it's a low bridge now, but like I thought it was really
Yeah,
high.
it looks. I think back in that case, it does look pretty dang high. Let's see. I'm trying to judge. I'm looking at a picture of it falling
But
down.
I see a picture of I think it's because it's from the side.
Right down, but it's the one down below and to the left. That's the one I'm looking at.
But yeah,
And
the new one, it's not near as high as I sort of imagined.
right?
Um,
Yeah, because the new one is quite a bit lower than the old one. Yes, it is quite a bit lower than the old
Yeah.
one, which is probably wise.
well, it's also like if you ever seen those, like that picture of the bridge, and it looks like the cars just go up this
Yes.
huge, but it's all
Yep.
because of the angle.
Right, it's the angle of getting
Like
up
those
there.
cars aren't going up; they're going this
Right.
way.
Right,
It's
Right.
just the angle makes it appear
the angle of picture. Right.
steep
Mhm.
when it's maybe
Well,
not.
the angle of pictures can do all kinds of deceptive things. Interestingly enough, it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. Like Evie, the thing that she loves doing nowadays is putting her phone on 0.5. You know, the fisheye angle, and then she takes a picture like right here, right in front of your face, and it makes your face look like this giant bloated monstrosity,
Oh,
and
goodness.
it even makes your eyes look like they look away from each other. Like it's just absolutely insane. So the angle of a camera and the lens you're using kind of determines a lot of the reality that you see in that photo, right? Even
Yeah.
photos that don't. I mean, we would think if you were to ask most people, does a photo depict reality? Most people would say, oh, absolutely. And then you would bring up like what you were saying with the a picture
Oh, I can.
of cars.
It's like if you have you ever heard the thing where, so introductory physics students were given a test, and PhD students were given the same test, and the PhDs did worse. Why did they do worse?
They overthought it.
Yeah, they thought about all the
Yeah.
like
All the
sitting
things
there
they
saying,
learned messed them
What
up.
about this? What about this? What about
Right.
this? Like I
Instead
think
of
of
looking to
photos
the
and I'm
obvious
like,
solution.
okay, yeah, you've got your lens will do something, your chromatic aberration will do something, like you do stuff in post processing.
Your sensor will do stuff. The file format that you save it in will do stuff. Your post processing will do stuff.
Yeah, so I know all of the things that can happen with the photo. So I'm
Right.
like, well, no, photos aren't really reality.
No. And bringing up just like what you were saying, like the picture of the cars going up at this angle. They're not going up at that angle. It's just the angle of the picture that makes them look like they're going up that angle.
Yeah.
So it doesn't denote reality because it doesn't actually show what happened. And of course, when you bring post processing into it, then all of a sudden it's like, well, I mean, you can do a lot of
Photoshop, and then you
Yeah.
throw AI Photoshop.
Yeah, screw that. And then you definitely don't have. But I mean, you can do, but I think a lot of people don't understand. You can do a lot of in-camera stuff to
Yeah.
make things. Like everybody, like a photographer that's doing senior pictures or doing wedding pictures, or there are angles that make people look better.
Yeah.
And they will play those angles because that provides
Like
the
my wife
best
says, don't
shot.
take the picture from down below.
Down below, you always take it from above, right? And it's the same thing with like on Instagram. Like people learn how to maximize the way they look. They learn how to maximize the way they look, and so you get and if you were to ask anybody, does Instagram represent reality?
No,
No.
I think
Right?
most
Even
people
the
would say no.
even the pictures themselves, if they weren't doctored, still don't represent reality, right? And
Yeah.
that's where the deeper questions get in. Is like, yeah, it doesn't represent reality because you really never know what's going on in that picture and what's been done in camera or in situation that what do you call it, in situ, that they don't, that you don't see, right? The reality of those pictures.
I think of in situ when it comes to cancer, but that's a
yeah,
different thing.
in situ, yeah. It's
So
totally
I got a question for you, since you teach students. So
Uh-huh.
what are the things that you would tell a student to not ever do? Like what are things you
like in what context?
programming?
Like in
Like,
programming.
don't
Like-
ever like if you think you should do that, just don't.
I would always tell them, don't ever copy someone else's code and just call it your own.
Well, but I mean,
was like a-
Copilot.
I think the most coders are going to have to be like AI is the future of coding, right? Like straight up. So if you want a job, it's moving. What's happening? It's sort of like the factory assembly line. You know, it used to be the assembly line was all kinds of people putting little bits and bobs together, right?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of jobs, tons of jobs. And then robots came along, robotic arms that are doing all the welding, that are doing blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, all these people lost jobs, and everybody's like, oh, this is horrible. But in reality, now somebody has to take care of the robotic arms, right? Somebody has
Yeah.
to design the software. Somebody has
Well,
to do the engineering.
low skilled labor.
Low skilled labor got eliminated, and it pushed the high skilled labor up, right? So artificial intelligence is the same situation, okay? Low skilled programming is kind of going away, right? Like you can have the artificial intelligence generate a lot of the code. So what is the job now for programmers, right?
Yeah.
You have to be good enough at coding to look at AI code and see how it can be made better, right? That's
Or see
essentially
how terrible it is, or how
Right.
it's like completely wrong, or
right. The design paradigm is wrong. The whatever, you know, like all sorts of things. And so when I tell students, because I'll tell them, don't like you're going to use AI in your job, but in introductory classes, I tell them don't ever use it because it'll become a crutch for you. And if it becomes a crutch for you, then they'll just hire someone at minimum wage to do your job instead of paying you a bunch
yeah.
of
But
money.
okay,
right?
so I had this debate. I don't remember how it turned out. I partially remember how it turned out with a colleague of mine when I was in grad
Right.
school. Like, what's the difference between a tool and a crutch?
Right. And we actually touched on this like last week, I think. What is the difference between a tool and a crutch? And I think the issue is a tool is used maximally, and you actually a tool. Let's see if I can explain this. A tool improves your work. A tool improves your work.
Yeah.
A crutch is your work. A tool
I mean,
improves.
so when I think of crutch, I think of something that you say I can't live without.
Right. It is your work. It is. So
Yeah,
like
but
a-
I think it is your work. Like I can think of. I mean, I've had Copilot a little while. You know, I know that if I don't have it, there are going to be tasks that are going to take me longer.
maybe this. A crutch is you add value to it. A tool is it add values to you. It adds value to you. A crutch is you add value to it. A tool is it
I mean, the third
adds
option
value to
is
you.
that these are actually the same thing, and one is just meant to
Right.
be derogatory, and the other
Right.
is not.
Yeah, I think the difference between a crutch and a tool is if somebody takes it away from you, can you still do what you need to do? Right? Like a crutch is if someone takes that tool from you.
Yeah, but like every editor you use, like
right.
if I took away all of your editors and I only gave you cat, like it would take you forever to do your job.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Well,
forever.
but I still would be able to do it.
Well, that
Right.
depends, right? Like, okay, I want you to write 1,000,000 lines of code, and I'm
Right.
giving you cat. Like you,
Right.
it's like those games where like, if you play the free version, like you literally cannot get to the level of
You
like
can't get the level. Yeah, you
master
cannot do
whatever because
it.
it's
Right.
physically you don't have enough time to
Right.
do it. So I think, I mean, partially I think it's just because people want to be derogatory and argumentative, like
Right.
to say, well, this is
But
a tool
there-
versus this is a crutch.
But there is a real situation where it is a crutch, though. So it's not just derogatory.
Well,
Because
I
there are
think
some
there
people-
are some people, right, who
Yeah, that just can't. They can't write code by themselves.
I think the
and
very
they-
extreme case I think makes sense. I think in the middle I think it's actually gray and that it's
Right.
not actually a difference. I think in the extreme case you have somebody who, you know, you look at Bitcoin bros or whatever, right?
right,
Like
right,
AI bros or whatever you're going to call them.
right.
Like I
right.
think there are people who can talk the talk and
Right,
walk
and
the
can't
walk
do
with the
anything.
tool, but if you get out of that, which I think we maybe the
Mhm.
week before we talked about,
Yep.
you know, I think you get to that point where you have people who are just pretenders,
Right.
and I
Right.
think we actually have a lot of that. You know,
I think you're right. Yep.
I was watching a stream and they were talking about like boot camps need to die, and
hmm
I have thought that and probably agreed with that longer than most people, but
Right.
you know, I see those people as so like if all you're learning is React and some query framework, whatever you want to call it, like how much value do you add as like a general purpose developer? Like I understand that we need those people, but like you can take a front end person and teach them.
And that's where I get back to the crutch is what is a crutch versus a tool is where does the value come from? That's where I'm asking. That's what I'm saying is, are you valuable or is the tool valuable? Like, where does the value of it come from, of your work come from, right? So like, if the tool is the primary originator of value, then it is a crutch. If you are the primary originator of value, then it is a tool, right? Like let's go to automotive, right? So the automotive people have all kinds of fancy tools, right? But ultimately they have to have the core understanding of how to coordinate those tools to be able to actually do what they need to do, right?
Yeah.
You could have somebody that has all kinds of cool tools and you go into their shop and be like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And they could do some things that look cool, right? But in order to actually make a car from scratch that's beautiful and that runs well, it's sort of like Orange County choppers, right? Like all their choppers suck. All their motorcycles suck. But they looked like they could do it, right? They had all the cool tools and they did all the cool things, right? I think it's the same thing with the crutch versus the tool. Like, where does the value come from? Does it come from you as the person or does it come from the tool? And I think that's where the delineation now, and again, I think you're exactly right. Like on one extreme, the tool is all of the value. On the other extreme, you are all the value. But in the middle, it's kind of sometimes maybe it's more you, maybe it's more the tool occasionally.
Well,
here
and I think,
I
think I think we see the limitations of what the tool can do. And I think that the hallucination issue, I think is actually much worse because like I can't have a tool that doesn't alert to me that the results that it are getting are like, well,
or maybe
this will work. Like that doesn't help me. But like
it's like
with super simple tasks, like for example, I wanted to read a file and basically do grep or sed on a file to do a search and replace. And I literally I wrote it and then somehow it didn't get put into Git. So then I had to rewrite it. I'm like, But I just put a comment, said, read file into, and like Copilot just, these 6 lines, right? Those 6 lines are super easy to write.
Right.
And it can't get them wrong. But that's the sort of good case of, okay, you got tools, right? You're a mechanic. Right. You got a brand new car.
Yeah, it makes you go faster.
Hey, it works fine. Faster.
Right.
It's what happens when I've got my stinking, spindle rusted to the hub. Like, what do you do then? Like, there is no
special tool. Right.
Yeah.
What's the solution? You got to know what you're doing.
Grinder.
Yeah. You got to cut it off, right?
Like, there was no substitute for like, okay, let's solve a problem. Let's figure out.
Right.
Like this is clearly.
But ultimately,
we've got tools. We got to use our brains to figure out how to work the tool.
You have to be the one who's the primary value, right? Like, and that's where I think AI and quantum computing. I mean, you and I have talked about this. I got people think when quantum computing becomes a reality, it's going to be everything. Like a lot of people are like, well, when quantum computing, I'm going to have a quantum computer and it's going to be only quantum and everything's quantum, right? When in reality, that's not the case. When quantum computing becomes a thing, right, you're going to have standard computing and you're going to have quantum computing and you're going to have some problems originating toward quantum computing and some problems originating toward standard computing, right? Yeah. It's not going to be all of anything, right? There's going to be a little bit of a mix between, right? And so artificial intelligence, everybody's like, well, artificial intelligence is the silver bullet to solve everything. Just like quantum computing is the silver bullet to solve everything.
I think general AI is, right? So if I can take a thing and have it, if I can train it, right? And not this, oh, well, you got to give it training data and it's got to be formatted. Like if I can just say,
and the training data's got to be good.
Hey, here's this thing. Like, can you go research it and like actually figure this out?
Right.
Like, if I had that, yeah, I wouldn't need all my developers,
Right.
or they would be doing different things. You
Right.
know? I think.
And the
that's,
question, I guess, in your mind, how close are we to that?
well, we're not there yet. I'm of two minds. I think either we need a hardware breakthrough, which I think we could do. Like, I
Right.
think you could actually build.
Definitely need a hardware breakthrough.
I think you could build neurons, like, similar to how you can basically program a computer using an GPA
FPGA, field programmable
FPGA.
gate array. Yeah.
array. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so you can build a computer out of, like, programmable computer bits, right?
Right.
I feel
Yep.
like you could
just put
have
logic gates together.
programmable computer neurons, right? That you could
Right.
build, and
Right.
and if you had processes where this thing could actually have a mental model.
Mhm.
Side note. So, did you know that not all people have a voice inside their head that sort of goes when they're not talking? Do you have one?
I definitely do. Like, it's
Okay.
it's going all the
There
time.
are people
Yes.
who don't.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I do not understand this.
See, there was a conversation. This could sound very offensive to some people, but this idea of NPCs, you know the idea of a
Yeah.
non-playable character, right? In my mind, I don't think I would not. I mean, I think they do exist. I would not think that they exist. Because in my mind, in the way that I see the world around me, there is a lot of critical thought on everything, probably too much, right? I overthink everything. I tend to overthink everything. You know me for years, you know I overthink everything, okay? Which means the voice in my head is going, and it's going all the time, right? So there is not sort of this core programming to me that says you must do this always. I'm always thinking why, when, how, all the questions, right? That thought in your head that's if you make a decision, it thinks about it again and again and again, and was this right? Was it wrong? What happened? What was the outcome? How can I do it better next time? Should I do it better next time? Should I just avoid it altogether? All these sorts of questions. But like you said, there are actually people that exist in this world that do not have, and I know it sounds offensive, but they do not have that level of critical thinking. It just doesn't exist. That voice in the head doesn't exist. It's
Well, I think those are two different things, but yes.
yeah,
Like that.
But they
right.
are two different things. You're right, because there are some people who think critically without a voice, but I would say in general that's the two sets I think overlap a lot.
And
Right? Like,
how much of that do you think is nature versus nurture?
right? I don't. The genetic.
I mean,
like
there are
the nature
clearly
versus
some
nurture
people
is,
that, as I would say, are as dumb as a rock, right? Like,
right.
there
They're
are
born
clearly
that
some
way,
people
right?
that don't have it.
And there are some people who are born that just think a ton very early, right? And you can see like children that think very deeply about things very, very early, and it's not like they were taught to think deeply about these things, right? Yeah. And so I think there is definitely a nature element, but I think there's also a nurture element. And I had a phenomenal conversation with a buddy of mine about the nature versus nurture debate, because nobody really wants to think about it too deeply, because the nature of the conversation is kind of scary, right? Like, because now you're getting into genetics, and and if you say some people are dumb as a rock because of their genetics, and some people are terribly intelligent because of their genetics,
or if you're smart and you say, well, yes, actually both of these play a role, but
right,
some people can level up. Right?
They can level up, right? There is
they
some
were not
innate
up,
ability to level
leveled
right?
Up, right? And I think that's the nurture part.
Yeah,
but you also have probably a ceiling.
The nature part.
Right?
Yeah,
some people their ceiling is here, and some people their ceiling is here. I mean, that's
what's crazy is there is a situation. There's a probability of a situation where someone is born with this low level intelligence, but their ceiling is all the way up here, right?
Yeah.
And so they have I think these are the kind of people that books get written about, right? Where they start way down here and they go up so far that it is just mind blowing, right? Like Einstein, to an extent, I think his inability, mentally is far overblown. He was quite capable as a child of doing math. In
He's
fact, he was
right place,
right place, right time. But like when you read about Einstein, like they say, oh, he got failed out of school. Well, they think most people cast that as he got failed out of school because he was stupid, which is not remotely even true. He got failed out of school because he thought too deeply about everything and wouldn't just do it because people told him. Like that's why he got failed out of school.
Yeah.
And like he had a weird, like Einstein would have been weird as a kid. So there was one thing I was reading about Einstein. He would repeat phrases over and over and over and over and over and over again until they were perfect to himself, and then he would say them. So for instance, if you said, Adam, how are you today? The way he would respond is he would go, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm good, everything's good, everything's okay, I'm fine.
Everything's terrible.
And then I look at you and I go, things are fine, right? Like that's the way he would react. And so people think that I mean, obviously, if you're in a school, that would be a weird kid, right? And you would wonder about that kid. But ultimately, that thought, that obsessive tendency to think an idea through until it was absolutely solid, is what gave him his quote unquote superpower, right? And is that genetic or is that nature? Is that nurture? I think it's 100% nature, right? Because as a child, it wasn't like someone said, you need to say these phrases and these words until they're perfect, right? Like nobody taught him that. That was something that just came out of him. But it is also scary because people don't want to go that direction because that indicates that some genetics have, that people are, and I'm going to put air quotes, people are not quote unquote equal, right? They're equal. Like to me, they're
equal. I think
equal.
you can say things and not be a jerk about it. Like,
right. Like people are, to me, people are equal of value. They're equal under God.
Well,
right?
it's like
every person is innately.
I don't find myself smart. Like I think I'm normal. Like I understand sometimes.
Just a normal person. Right.
Like I'm a farm kid, right? Like.
Yep.
But I sometimes struggle with like how can you not, like I remember I was teaching a lab one time and there was she probably wasn't a young lady, so it was a lady that was taking a programming class for the first time. And like I explained over and over and over again, like,
and she just couldn't get it.
We were doing print, right? Like system.out.print. And like she just
that's like
didn't
lab
understand. Like she couldn't comprehend. Like I'd say, well, now modify the string. Well, what's the string? Okay, the string is this. Modify the string so it prints out a different phrase, like basic first day of class type thing.
Change the words. Yeah.
Yeah, and she just didn't get it. And like, so to me, right, some of those concepts are foreign, but I don't find it like. I just feel like she was below average. I just feel like I'm average. Like
right.
This is where
that's how I feel. Like I feel I've
got a lot of
very,
experience,
very average. Right.
But I'm average.
Right. Just very average. And that's how I feel. Because I think even being in academics is only wanting to learn. Right. Like I'm an average person. My intelligence is average, but I like to learn. It's something that I'm passionate about. Right. Something that I'm interested in, and acquiring knowledge brings me joy, right? So learning new things is fun. So I will look up.
Well, and also
like you and
I think we both like computers because,
right?
You know, I think there is a certain joy in having a thing that sort of does the things you tell it to do.
Yeah, right.
And B, like does them in a fashion that is repeatable in the sense that I know that a thing is going to work,
right?
The way I think it's going to work, and if I don't, I can experiment. Like I think
mess around with it. Yeah, it's the when you were a kid. Question: when you were a kid, did you take everything apart?
Oh, I took apart every single TV.
Yes.
So we used to have hogs, right? And in order to keep them from startling when you'd walk in, my dad would put a TV in there. So he'd put a TV in a building that had tons of dust and
heat,
humidity.
Humidity mostly.
And they would die amazingly.
Yeah. Of course it would. Why wouldn't
So then I would take them apart not knowing that they're in most cathode ray tube TVs. There is definitely a giant capacitor in there that if charged when that thing was turned off will kill you. Nobody told me this. Still, I took them apart. I'll learn this at a much later date in my life.
You know what's ridiculous? I knew it. I did know that there's a capacitor, and the capacitor is deadly. And
I probably still would have for a while.
Did I tell you about the base amp story? My base amp story? Probably not. Okay, so I was working in the studio in Denver. It's called Alley Studios, and the guy had a boatload of vintage equipment. Super. I was 22 maybe. Okay, so he had a boatload of really cool vintage equipment that was broken. Okay, and I had gone through quite a bit of electrical engineering and all my audio engineering, and I knew how to do electrical pretty well. And I was like, okay, I'll take this stuff. If I could get it working, it'll be awesome, right? Because it's vintage equipment. So I have this one bass amp, and it's a stinking sweet bass amp. It's an old Ampeg from 1970s, which means it's hideously valuable. It was tube, had a tube preamp, but it wouldn't work. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to fix it because then I have a vintage Ampeg, right? And that's stupid cool. That's awesome. I can play it in the band. It's really neat.
Everybody will say, man, that guy he is one starving lion.
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
He's one starving. The starving lion didn't exist at that point. It was this guy is a setback.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's just, theorizing.
Anyway, so I'm dorking around with this thing, and I recognize the ginormous capacitors. I see them. I'm looking at them. I am acknowledging them. I understand that I had it plugged in just a few minutes ago. And I didn't kill me because the capacitor that I touched wasn't one of the real big ones. Cooked myself on one of those things. It was so bad I just had to lay down for about 20 minutes because I was just like, yeah. And I knew better. I knew better, Matt. I knew better at that. Like, at least for you, you could claim ignorance, right? Like on those sorts of things. Dang it, I didn't have any ignorance whatsoever. I knew how bad that was. Because I also knew, like, generally you wanna discharge the caps, right? You just take a screwdriver with an insulated handle, and you connect the 2 points, and it'll discharge the caps immediately, right? It's kind of a cool arc, and it pops pretty loud, but I didn't even discharge the caps, even though I knew it. And part of that, I think, is when you do a thing a lot, you tend to get complacent.
Well,
so going back to CrowdStrike, right? Was it a matter of complacency that they've done it so many times that they become complacent in the rigidity of the safety procedures?
I think so. Like, what number was it? Like 200 and something? So they've done it.
Right. They've done it,
200
right?
and something times?
It reminds me of, so my wife's dad is he's a prison guard, and he was one of the main firearms instructors in Kansas for the Kansas prison system. And he did all the firearms instruction for all the beginners, right? And I was just talking to him about it, and there was a situation where he was training a new person, and this new person just about shot Dad in the head. And he looked at me and he said, "Adam, I knew I needed to quit. You know why?" And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "It didn't bother me a bit."
Yeah.
Like, he was like, I got so complacent in the safety procedures that it didn't even bother me.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not being vigilant in maintaining safety, so I need to quit." Right. And it makes me wonder if like my bass amp is me being complacent. Like, I was so used to working on things that it wasn't a big deal, so I cooked myself, right? It's just like every electrician has multiple stories of getting shocked, right? They have it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, there's safety procedures for a reason, and you just kind of forget it after a while. And maybe that was the CrowdStrike situation.
So I'm very I cut wood with a chainsaw, and so I'm very cognizant of the fact that I could cut my leg off, right? And so I did buy pants, but also I know if I ruin those pants, like, that's $150.
Yeah,
I have to pay if I ruin them.
Yeah.
Which,
you ruin a leg,
it's fine, but it's still $150. I'm like, oh, I don't pay.
Yeah, but
I am very, like, I have that sort of fear of, like, I know this thing can be deadly, but it's also really easy.
It's a great tool
when you are sitting there and you're just trying to quickly cut a bunch of limbs, small limbs. Okay, not a big deal. Like, it still will cut my leg off if I.
Yes, it will. Yeah.
It's probably more likely to cut my foot off, so I guess I'm a little protected.
Well, ultimately, like with your, because you have the chainsaw pants, right? That are chainsaw. So here's the thing. Like, okay, imagine even if you don't cut your leg off, but you get a real deep cut, $150 in medical bills.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. Like that's
Well,
that's
these
nothing.
Have you ever seen them when they?
I haven't. I've heard about them, but I've never seen them.
Like, it is instant, right? Those fibers just go right in there and just jam
and
it,
bog it down immediately.
Like, you won't even have a cut if you hit.
Yeah, because it'll shut the thing down so fast. Yeah.
It's
Where did you get them?
amazing.
Just at like Orscheln's
On
or
Amazon.
Oh, you just bought them on Amazon.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give myself some chainsaw pants. That would be dumb because I don't have a chainsaw and I don't even have
You
anything to do
should
with it.
definitely not give yourself chainsaw pants. I mean, if you want to get a chainsaw, I got
Well,
one. I'll sell you.
I definitely want to get a chainsaw. I just don't have any reason to have a chainsaw.
I
They're
got
like
one.
the
I got
synthetic
my old
ones.
one listed. It's just too small for me.
Yeah. What kind what kind of chainsaw do you run currently?
I have
Still,
no. Oh, you're gonna make me think of it.
The not the Helvetica. Computer coming out of
Husqvarna.
me. Husqvarna. I was gonna say it's the
Husqvarna.
H. I said Helvetica because of course I'm a computer guy. So
Helvetica. Everybody use Veranda. Come on.
yeah,
a
Veranda's
real
better
farm.
than Helvetica. Let's fight, right? No, then someone comes in, they're like Comic Sans all day, right? And then
Oh,
all of a sudden
gosh.
the rumble happens.
See, I do that. I tell people Comic Sans for something, and then
Right. Like we were joking in class about that, and I was like, everybody in here loves Comic Sans. That's fine. And everybody gets up and
Comic
like,
Sans
no,
is a fine font for comics.
right. So but it becomes a meme. So then I have kids that do their entire like final project presentation in Comic Sans because it's hilarious, and I laugh a lot because. But it just gets them
Courier
thinking
New.
about it.
That was the
Yeah.
one.
Dude, I like how
Widest.
Courier looks.
Well, the reason why people like it is because it's a wide font.
And it's monospace, right? So like everything lines up. Well, Courier New's mono, isn't it?
Is it?
Or is just Courier?
Yep. Fixed pitch.
Yep, it's Courier New monospace. That's what
Mm.
I like that because everything lines up really nicely. Like it's
Yeah.
really, really easy to.
But see, I don't. When you see it all the time, it's like I think it was the defaulting
Yeah.
word for.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
I
it looks
don't
like a
know what it is
typewriter.
now.
I mean, nowadays, Times New Roman has been. You've seen it so much that Courier New is like, ooh, it's vintage. It looks cool. It's like, oh, he wrote it in a typewriter, right? And when I was doing screenwriting, you have to do Courier New. Like in screenplays, it's industry standard is Courier New because it needs to
I
look
mean,
like you
I
did it on a
actually
typewriter.
find the credits super annoying. Like, I don't understand why they like why don't they have a stinking QR code that's like if you want to see the credits.
If you want to
go
know,
here.
right. That's just. Are you telling me that the movie industry might be behind the times? Is that what you're saying? Matt?
Although when I watched what was it? Ahsoka.
Yeah, Ahsoka. Yeah.
I was completely taken aback. Like we were watching the opening credits, and it's like David Tennant. I'm like, whoa.
Yes.
Where? Huh?
The Doctor? What?
What? The best Doctor?
Yeah, the best Doctor. What?
I mean,
Yep.
I think you're gonna get people hating you on that one, but
Well,
I mean, I think
all
he
you
was
Doctor
the
Who
best
people,
Doctor,
right?
hands down.
I think he was a great Doctor too. I think he was awesome.
I can't think of anybody better. I just
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm still blown away at what they did with the Mandalorian. Like with their the parallax effect with the active backgrounds.
Well, I think that's
So cool.
I have often thought that was probably a thing that should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah,
I understand
they
that
should
it
have.
was probably technically difficult because you have
Right.
shutter issues.
Problems. Yeah. Because
But-
but here's the thing. Sync has always been a thing in the movie industry. Always. Synchronization between frame rates and everything has always been a thing, right? Like you have what's it called? Black sync? No, black something or the other. And it is literally a centralized clock that syncs all of your cameras and monitors together. It's always been a thing. It's never been an issue, right? So the whole synchronizing the camera frame rate and shutter to the background has never been an issue. It's the mathematics of the parallax behind it that was always the hardest thing to figure out. But still, it's not that hard.
Well,
right?
I was meaning like when you look at old CRT things, like you could
Yeah,
see
and you
the-
see the actual there are like, have you ever watched movies where they actually film the screen, like The Shining, where they have the screen and it doesn't have that?
Well, I know you can do it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and most movies have always done that, right? Like it's only like amateur home movie kind of things that you don't have sync.
the news, right? Like
Yeah, or the news, right? But like all movie studios have always synced. Sync is one of the most basic concepts in filmmaking, right? You sync everything. You know, even to the point where sound, whenever you're on set, they say, rolling, and then you say sound speed, which indicates that your sync is on. So you're actually paying attention to whether or not you're syncing or not, right? There's a reason why, when you do sound, 88.2 is a sample rate. 88.2, 44.1, 24, and 48, right? So the reason why you always do sound at 48K is because generally movies are filmed at 24 frames per second.
Mm.
So you have your samples are split evenly per frame.
So that there's always a way to.
So you're never having a sample halfway between frames, because then you get aliasing, right? So you get weird alias frequencies. So you do 44.1 16-bit for audio, and that was just because that's CD. 44.1 basically makes sure that you can get up to 20K without any aliasing, which is top range of human hearing. So you can double that with 88.2, right? So you can actually technically go up to 40K, but you have better, higher resolution. You could do 24, has really bad aliasing, 24,000 samples per second. So you have to go up to 48,000 samples per second, because then you have, explicitly, 24,000 samples per frame. No. 48,000 divided by 12. I usually have computers do that for me. 48 divided by 12. 4, is that 4,000?
Yeah.
40,000? Yeah, 4,000. So you have distinct 4,000 samples per frame. It's not like 4,000 and a half samples, right? So sync, just driving on the point, like sync has always been something that's been in films. And that's why you're right in saying it should have happened earlier, right? It really should have happened earlier.
Yeah.
But I think, it's one of those, I think filmmaking is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of a
well,
thing.
also,
right?
like, the cost of building the panels.
Yes. Ridiculous. Because those
like,
are
how wide is that thing?
Oh, it's
that
big.
stage?
It's just massive.
I mean,
and the
good
panels
thing
are all
about that-
curved.
Yeah. That's
So
amazing
and getting-
that they can put it together. And
even the curvature mathematics is hard, right? So like that's probably the parallax and the curvature was really difficult. But the thing I love about it is it puts the character in the environment instead of having the green screen where you're getting a lot of green reflection. You just have the colors of the surroundings on the characters themselves.
And then you can have a green Muppet be your
right,
and a yellow and a blue Muppet, and
right,
all of the key colors that people.
You can also do your keys, right,
were
which is
used to
super
doing.
cool. But like the Mandalorian doing that was just the coolest thing ever, and I don't know. I think it's, but still, I think the movie industry falls behind to a greater extent on a lot of things. They're just trying to catch up with, like, movie theaters. Like, in 10 years, movie theaters are going to be a thing of the past. We're going to tell people.
So.
I think so. I don't see how they can continue the market, because most people don't go to movies anymore. They'll just watch it on streaming service. They'll watch it at home, right? And movies are very expensive.
There's
an
enjoyment of going out and doing it. It's like,
right.
I can make food at home, but I still
go out
to go out.
Right.
Eat,
Yeah, I just don't know if it's a big enough demand to keep the industry moving.
Okay, I don't think it's the same demand, but it's a demand. Right. Like, why are they a thing now? It's because people still.
Yeah. But the question is, they're still a thing, but why are they closing down left and right?
Oh, I know why.
What I'm saying?
I agree. Demand is going down.
Right,
but
and that's where. So
I think that's your demand for your minimum bar. Like, if you look at some of the theaters that they have out there, like, even if you go to in Kearney, right? You go to the nice
Golden Ticket,
the one on the hill. What's that?
Yeah, because the Cinema 8's closed, so like that one just closed down because they weren't making enough money.
Yeah,
we only have one.
The one in the mall.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, there's World.
Oh, there's World. Yeah, World is kind of a niche. That one's very much a niche.
That's the whole thing, right? So
yeah,
like
those ones are the ones that'll survive. Those are the ones that'll survive.
But if you go to just I have seats and I sell popcorn, movie theater, right? Like, there is an appeal to that, but there is much more of an appeal to something either high end, like
Golden Ticket,
like seats that recline and
vibrate.
And
you can get food, right?
Or World, which is nostalgic, or even like high end, like
movies.
Okay, you're getting dinner and you're watching a movie
and wine and right.
Like it's an experience,
right?
As opposed to that's the only way we can consume something that is new.
Right. So ultimately, what happens with the movie theaters is they become a niche thing. Like they're fewer and further between, and you're paying for the experience. You're not paying
You were always paying
necessarily
for the
movie.
experience, but
Right.
But
But
they
it's not.
had
It's not like
they had
economy.
they used to have a really long lead time, right? So when
Right.
VHS first came out, like
So it took it forever. Yeah.
yeah,
a
so if you want to
year.
see that now, great.
You got to go.
If you want to,
Right.
if you don't want to go to the theater, you're gonna wait 9 months or
Right.
whatever it is. Titanic, probably 9 months, right?
Right.
Like to see it, but then you can watch it as much as you want. Like you get all these other benefits. But I think when you look at entertainment, like things have got to figure out where they want to be.
Right.
You know,
Well, I think the pandemic did a lot of that because they started bumping up their
it
releases
accelerated
online
things to
so
a rate.
fast. Yeah.
Right? It
To,
accelerated
well, I think it.
companies
I think
being
to
able to work from home.
Right. Well, it also, I think, to an extent, going to the movie was a habit, and it broke the habit for a lot of people, and they just stopped going, and they never picked it back up. And I think in difference to like restaurants, food is such a core thing to humanity. I think restaurants will always exist just because food is so important. Movies, I don't think are up as high on sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for humans. So I think that movie theaters are. I think
But
they won't
movies are
totally
just
go
a
away,
cog in a giant.
but they're
like,
gonna.
You look at
Yeah,
movies, books,
Right.
sports. Like
Right.
people want to have a thing that they can follow. They can
Right.
root for the hero,
Right.
maybe root for the villain, root for the underdog, watch the underdog. I mean, all of that sort of falls into your entertainment
Domain.
guys.
Yep.
You talk to sports people and they probably don't admit this, but like sports is entertainment
Oh yeah, straight up entertainment.
at a very significant level, which is
Right.
quite bad. Like
Right.
I realized I was in a board meeting for soccer and I realized how different I was than the people that were in that room. Like they were talking about, like I don't know if you've seen this, but like they have a camera that like sits above, like you have a pole and it sits up 15 feet or whatever.
And you can see the whole pitch. Or
It
the whole
records
thing.
the whole pitch. It records who
Right.
has the ball, what they did with it. You can then look at clips of just your kid or whatever.
Whoa.
Right. And
wow.
they're sitting there talking about, well, you can go get the footage and you can get like a highlight reel so that you can give it to recruiters. And I'm like, this is not
That's insane. That's
not what
nuts.
I was looking for.
Right.
These are
That's
not the droids
crazy.
I was looking for when I
Right.
thought about sport.
Right.
And I know
Sport's
that
it's supposed to be a hobby. It's something you do for fun to stay in shape.
it's supposed to be about
Discipline.
building a team,
Character. Yeah.
overcoming like the lessons that you can learn in sports where you're
Mhm.
overcoming adversity. That adversity can be at so
Yep.
many levels, like this pitch, this at bat, this game, this season, my lifetime, like
this day, this weather, this like this whatever the thing
playing
is. There's
football
so
in
many
the
things.
mud, playing
In the
football
mud,
in
the snow.
freezing rain.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
Like
And
those,
and
those are
growing
things
disciplined. Yep. Yeah.
that like, so there's like the physical aspect and there's the mental aspect, and then people watch this because it's entertaining. Again, like
Right.
that is not the realm that I want to be in when I'm
Right.
sitting there thinking about coaching or my kids. Like I just don't think that's not what it should be about. It should be about your personal growth, and like I don't really care if you win or not. Like
Right. Who cares? Yeah, winning doesn't matter. It's are you growing in character, right? 'Cause
winning should
I
matter.
even
Winning should matter to the players. It actually shouldn't matter
Right.
to the parents.
right. And winning should matter to the players as a means of motive, but not necessarily as like the core tenet of why they do it.
Exactly.
Because if winning is everything, you're going to be a miserable person because you are going to lose. Like that's just the reality of the
Yeah, so,
situation.
like-
No matter how good you are, there's someone who's better. Like it's just
So
it's just how
I
it is.
I play basketball and I really enjoy the fact that like, so for example, when we're playing, we don't have refs.
Right.
So we call defense calls their own fouls. And then everybody is expected to be honest. Like, okay, if the
About
ball
that.
goes out of bounds, like
Yep.
who hit it last, right?
There's an
And
honor system. Yeah.
like it is amazing how we can sit there and agree. Like somebody will be like, no, I hit it last. And the other person's like, no, I hit it last. Like,
Right.
the person who actually hit it last is like, no, really, I did. And very rarely, like, we don't know. And then we just like, okay, well, I
Who
don't
wants
know.
it? Yeah,
Somebody
whatever,
gets the
doesn't
ball.
matter. Right.
Jump ball. Well, you know,
Yeah.
like, I find that so refreshing in comparison to watching any high school or sanctioned sport where
Yeah, where
it
they
is
argue
always about
everything. Yep.
the ref missed
Me,
the
me, me,
call.
me, 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 me. How
The-
do I
the
benefit
ref hates
from the
us.
situation?
Why do
Yes.
they always hate us? They
Yeah,
never hate
right.
the
They're
other
always
team.
against us. Yeah. And that to me is where it goes too far, right? Because sports is supposed to be something that builds your character, builds your discipline. And here's the thing, it should bring you some joy, right? Like you should be having some fun. It's just like for me, music. With me, it's music, right? When music becomes something that you do not take joy in anymore, why are you doing it? It's just like sports, right? Like when basketball becomes something you don't take joy in anymore, why in the world are you even doing it?
Yeah.
And a lot of people
I
be like, well, I'm going to
definitely
be in
won't
the
be if I don't.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to be in the NBA. No, you're not. Like the probability, it's just like me in music, right? Like if I would have crunched the numbers and figured out the probabilities of me actually becoming a rock star, I don't think I would have done it because it would have been better for me to go buy lotto tickets because the probability is higher that I win the lottery
it's-
and win
and-
millions of dollars than it is become a famous rock
Well,
star.
and part of
right?
that is because talent does not necessarily
equate
like
to success.
the
Yeah.
very top talented people. Yeah, they can do it.
Right.
The other like chunk,
Most of them?
is people who are not.
Like Taylor
super
Swift is not that talented. I know probably some Swifties out there are going to get mad at me, but she's not that
But she
talented.
doesn't
That's
have
fine.
to be.
She makes great music. I'm not arguing about that. 1989 phenomenal album. She was working with a fantastic songwriter. Great, wonderful. She's not the most talented. She's probably not even close to the most talented musician on this planet.
Yeah.
She's probably in the lower 10% of the most talented musicians in this planet. Talent does not equate to success.
Yeah, I mean, you look at somebody like Alicia Keys on the piano, right?
Right.
Very talented.
Very talented,
You know,
but
you
not the
look
most
at-
talented.
Super. You know, there are. I don't know guitar people, right? But you can
Right.
name a whole bunch of
yeah.
people who are super talented at guitar, right? And
But
I
aren't
could
famous,
I could
yeah.
see it when I do it.
Yeah.
Or,
Well,
or
like,
when I go
there's-
to a live concert in the park, like
Yes.
it's awesome to see somebody do a thing that they're
Right.
really good at.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, you should be doing that for the joy of the thing. Because if you're doing it because you're going to be the better, there are very few people that have reason to actually do that kind of a thing, right? Like to be famous or to, be on the NBA or be in the NFL or be in the whatever. Like, don't do sports because of that. Because, like you said, like the camera, get the footage for a recruiter. Like you're not playing soccer to enjoy soccer. You're not playing soccer to get better. You're not playing soccer to build character. You're not playing soccer to overcome adversity. You're not playing soccer to build integrity and honor and discipline and these transcendent things that actually mean something in the real world. You're playing soccer because you think you're going to get some sort of a financial windfall.
You're gonna
out of it,
get
right?
a scholarship so that you can go play soccer.
Right, go play soccer and still have to go to class, right? Like and like I can understand getting a scholarship for soccer isn't bad. It's not innately bad. If you're going to use that as a tool to go get a good job, fantastic, wonderful, excellent, because then your college is paid for, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's wonderful. But oftentimes that's not where people's intentions are from. They're like, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go play college sports because then I'm going to get I don't even
Then
know
I'm
how
gonna
it
go
works.
professional sports.
I'm going to go pro, right? And then I'm going to make millions and millions of dollars. They don't think, well, I'm going to go. There are some people that are very well grounded that say, I am going to use soccer so my tuition is paid for so that I can go be an engineer, right? That's a really grounded individual that I applaud all the way through, right? Because they're using what they have been given to try to maximize the outcome. But most people don't think that way. Like most people do not. I didn't think that way with my music, right? Like I didn't think I'm going to make all these songs because it brings me a lot of joy or I'm going to be able to pay my way through college, which I wouldn't because I wanted to do not music in university. I was like, I'm going to use this to become great and famous and glorious and blah, 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 right? And then it stole the joy. It completely stole the joy of it. And I hated it. And I learned to hate music, right? And recording and all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I had to quit for a while and remember why in the world I did music and recording in the first place. And that was because it's fun. Like, and there is sort of a a self-discovery and learning your limits and challenging yourself and working through adversity and building character that comes with, say, music production or music performance. And that's where you should find the joy. Like, you should find that the transcendental benefit of that, as opposed to, well, I'm going to make a boatload of money when my album goes big, like, which is always what, like, anytime I hear someone like, yeah, when I go big, I'm like, okay. When you go big, huh? And then that's just the reality situation. So, do something because it brings you joy. That's the beauty of it. The best way you could do it is find something that is socially beneficial, that has some demand that you can get paid for, and do that as your job, and then reserve your passion as a hobby. Like, if you're a mechanic, don't be a mechanic for a job. Or like, if you love working on cars, don't be a mechanic for a job, because you're going to be working on Chrysler Pacificas with blown head gaskets. You're not going to be building hot rods, right?
What?
Like, that's that's just the reality of the situation, right? Like, reserve that for your home time, for your hobby time, right? And that's my advice usually to people, especially if they're going to do something like music, right? Because there's very low probability of music or sports becoming your paycheck. Like, very low probability of that happening. So, but anyway, there's my rant.
I was trying to figure out how many. So I was trying to figure out how many professional sports people there were versus PhDs.
Oh, good grief.
So in the US, it looks like there are about 14,000
pro sports
professional sports people. And in the US, the number of science and engineering doctorate recipients is about 52,000.
Wow.
So
that's actually not as different. That doesn't differ as much as I thought it would, actually.
So I just find it interesting, because like, we focus so much on this, and yet the median pay for those professional athletes is $70,000.
Yeah. Think about that. Well, and it's the same thing with artists. Same thing with musicians. Median pay for musicians, a working musician, a pro musician, is going to be about $25,000 a year, probably. I'm going to be honest. Yeah, Taylor Swift makes millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. Okay,
that means
so
all those other people,
the top 0.001% of musicians make all the money, right? And all the rest of the pro musicians are singing into beer mics that reek of old beer and bad breath and barely making ends meet, right? Like 99.99% of musicians are starving artists. It's just the reality of the situation. But like, to me, part of that's industrial, though. The industry has to keep those people alive, because that's where most of the money comes from, is from those starving artists, shelling out dough to all these studios to be able to keep the studios going, and shelling out dough to the distribution companies and the managers and the blah, blah, blah.
Well, so they make more money on those than they make on...
Yeah, because that's the majority of the people. Yeah. Like, that's the like, yes, you're going to make some money on Taylor Swift, but... you think about all the thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon
people
thousands.
Making mixtapes and
right. When ultimately the only people that make money on Taylor Swift are these 0.001% of recording studios, 0.001% of venues, like, there is a level of musicianship where lots of money is made, and it's not including most people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So most recording studios are not going to be recording Taylor Swift. It's just not going to happen. And those kinds of recording studios are a totally different beast. We're having worked in some of those studios. It's a totally different thing, right? Like, you can't compare that to anything else, because it is its own thing. It's not. It's like saying slide guitar is exactly like playing acoustic guitar. It's not true. Like, there's some similarities. There's 6 strings and they're EADGBE, right? But like, that's about it. Everything else, all the technique, everything is totally different, right? And so, yeah, the majority of money, though, is made on the low-level artists that are shelling it out and shelling it out and shelling it out and shelling it out, because they ain't making any, but they're paying a bunch in.
Yeah.
And that's where the grind, like, I always advise young artists to avoid the grind. Just stay out of it. Don't even get into it. Buy an interface, buy a mic, record your own music for free, and, yeah, it won't sound like great,
you could
but
use
who cares?
this to record the same
Yeah.
things
Believe it or not,
as the studio? If I turn that
Yes.
fan off.
Yeah, you could 100%. And we have two mics between the two of us. I could lay an acoustic lick. You could sing. We're done. We got an album. It's
Boom.
over. Boom. We didn't pay any money.
Well,
Right, and-
let's see. My Focusrite is probably what, $150.
Yeah, and I got a Focusrite, which mine was probably 150. I got the 2i2.
I think that's
I have the
fine.
2i2.
Oh,
You
I
have
have
the
the
Solo.
Solo.
The Solo is, yeah, I think it's like 125 bucks.
And
the
then
2i2,
right,
I think is
the mic is
225.
probably mic and arm 250, 300.
yeah, this one was like 399. Okay, so here's the thing. Let's just say it's $1,000. You know how fast I can burn $1,000 in a recording studio?
No, I have no idea.
Oh my
How many hours?
Oh my gosh. I mean, at the lowest, I could give you 5 hours for $1,000.
Yeah.
5 hours. That's it. That's not including mixing. That's just it.
Sorry, it's probably $450 for this. Yeah, with the stand.
Yeah, this one is
$350
$400,
for the mic.
$399. So yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, we could do that, and then we can use Audacity, which is free, right? Or we could get Reaper, which is a $60 lifetime cost, and boom, we can literally make. I hate to say this, it would sound roughly the same as going into a local recording studio, right? Like, and because they're not going to spend a lot of time mixing your stuff. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Well, yeah, that's. I always found that like that seems like awful tedious work to do. Like I've done some mixing. Like I did a project where I took I had one camera that was facing a conductor, Dr. John Petzit, and the other one was from the audience view, but I couldn't connect them both to my
So you had to sync
mixing
them.
thing. So I had to
Yep.
I ended up overlaying the one on top of the other. I don't remember what I used to do. I think it must have been iMovie because I was cheap.
Yeah. As long as you got 2 movie tracks. Yeah.
But I had to figure out, okay, when did he start? I'm like, oh,
Yep.
this.
Do you know why in movies
Yes,
they
I do
have?
know.
Yes,
Yes.
it's sound
That's the
sync is what
sync.
it is. Yeah, because you can see on the movie where he hits it, and then you can look at your wave file and you can sound sync right on those. So usually nowadays we do that. We'll look at the camera and go, and action.
Well, and plus the other thing was that, like, I could
Documented,
tell
yeah.
actually when he like stopped, right? So when you stop the concert, right, like it's a very definite moment.
Right.
But I had, when I recorded it on the one camcorder, I had to stop halfway through, like so.
Oh yeah.
So DSLRs, because they're not camcorders, they
They're
can
not
only
cam-
record
For
about
so long.
29 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So for this long concert, I had to stop, start, and so
Mm-hmm.
then I had these multiple sync points of like,
So you had to cut again and again and
oh,
again.
it
Yep.
was-
Yep.
oh.
Well, like 2 camera with sound sync is a lot, you know.
Well, and I
But also-
only had to have one with sound, the other one I didn't care, but still
Right.
it was just like
Now
okay, I
imagine,
gotta-
so I just helped a local band mix a song, and the song had 75 audio tracks layered on top of each other, right?
Holy cow!
Yeah, and so when you get into the nuances of that, it's meticulous, and it's intense, and the only songs that are going to get that attention are if you are doing it for your own work or if it's Taylor Swift.
You're
Like,
getting
I know
paid a giant amount of
Yeah,
cash.
I know so many people like, oh, I got it mixed at this, this Grammy Award winning studio with this Grammy Award winning producer. And I'm like, or mixer. You think that mixer spent as much time on yours as he spent on
on the
Alicia
Grammy.
Keys? Are you serious? You think so? Because no, he pulls up a preset, runs yours through the preset, sends it back to you, cha-ching, collects $1,000 for 5 minutes. That's it. That's what they do for you. Okay, like they're not going to spend that kind of time on your
See, and
work. You will spend that much time on your work.
Yeah.
And so you should. Like
So
to me, I advise all of them, mix it yourself.
Do you pay person for their hours or for their expertise?
Right. Well, you pay them per hour for their expertise. That's why there's some people you pay $500 an hour and some people you pay $75 an hour. Right. So you do kind of both. You pay them for their hours and you pay them for their expertise. And that's where it's like, to me, I just left the rat race. So like anytime I do this stuff, it's just if it's something I want to do, if it's music that I like and it's people that I like, then I go in and I have fun with it. That's why I, like helped mix that local band. It's because I like them. They're great people. I didn't charge them for it. It was just fun,
Yeah.
And also, I'm at the point in my life where I'm looking for a protege because I know a lot of things in audio, way more than I should, and it's stupid. But I want to be able to hand that off to somebody, before I go deaf or die, so that it's not a total waste, so that at least somebody benefits from it. So I'm also looking for a protege. So I'm working with a lot of people like, is this person potentially a good protege? Someone who can hand your knowledge to and go, hey, take the torch and go do something with this so it's not a total waste of my life. And, then they can go benefit other people and they can, and so in doing that, I'm also teaching like 5 or 6 different people, all the mixing and all the concepts that I learned throughout all the years and all my experience, which is great too, because then they can go touch 5 other people and they can go touch 5 people. And so all of a sudden me being generous with what I know can actually affect hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people, as opposed to me being like, it's mine. And nobody ever listening to anything I do. Cause what I do isn't that great. I'm proficient, but it's not, I'm not the greatest in the world at that kind of stuff. So if I want to make an impact on the world, I just need to affect the people right in front of me and teach some people some things, and they can teach other people some things, and they can teach other people things. And before you know it, a ton of people have learned a lot of things from me, and I didn't have to be famous, And I wish everybody lived that kind of life where they're like, well, if I care about the people right in front of me, that actually is going to impact way more people than if I hold out to be famous or rich, or like it's soccer, right? Like if you're focusing on being good sportsmanship, and you're focusing on character, and you're focusing on hard work, you're impacting all of your teammates, and your teammates can then go impact other people who can impact other people. And there's an exponential growth of your impact on individuals when you impact them positively. But they're like, no, I'm going to argue with the ref, and I'm going to argue with the other players, and I'm going to, and, it's just very sort of like a self motive as opposed to a selfless motive. But if everybody sort of lived by that selfless motive, our society would be a different place completely. But,
Well,
self-aggrandizement is just part of who we
that's
are
not gonna,
right now. Right. It's not going to happen.
It's like, did you watch the, so there was a series, it starts with the Out, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank on it. But they were like, they had colonized Mars and Earth and the asteroid belt. There's a book about it. Oh, I'm drawing a blank.
The Expanse. Are you talking about The Expanse? Yes.
Right?
Yes, I did watch The Expanse.
So when you look at that, like right now, when we send somebody to Mars, right, they are the best and the brightest.
Yes.
Eventually, you're going to have The Expanse, right? You're going to have
You're going to have the...
You're going to have governments, and
you're going to have the Beltalotas eventually. You're going to have... Like, the thing I love about Expanse is they even account for, like, the body changes of the people out in the belt. And the people in the belt are the lowlifes. So what do they call them? Like, stretch or something like that. Because their bodies stretch out from living out in the zero-G all the time. And you get the Beltalotas and Ceres and all that kind of stuff.
And then they get to Earth and they're like, oh, it hurts.
It hurts so bad. Yeah, and it's like torture. It's you end up with the Expanse where the people, because eventually when we can mine the asteroid belt, they're not going to be sending the best and the brightest because they're going to die. Of course, they're not going to send the best and the brightest. Like you think about like when the best and the brightest were the first ones.
Any industrial, like you're going to have the whole gamut of life.
Yeah, well, ultimately, like the best
Johnson
example
County,
is
Kansas, but other than that,
right. The best example you're going to have is like Australia, for instance. Who did they send to Australia to start Australia? It was a penal colony for England. They sent all the crooks, all the criminals, and all the bad people there, and it was the backwoods outpost that people got punished to go to, right? And even think about the founding of America, right? It wasn't the best and the brightest of Europe. It was the people who were trying to run away and find some different life, right?
Yeah.
It was, you would consider, like we think of the Puritans as like, oh, that's so cool. In England, they were like the low lives. They were the people that were the troublemakers, right? They were the bad people that people didn't like. That's what's going to happen with space expansion. Like eventually it's not going to be the best and the brightest. It's going to be the expendables, right? Yeah. Especially if it's an industry, right? Like if they're mining asteroids, it ain't going to be college educated, wealthy, affluent people that are going out there putting on suits. I mean, there are going to be some, but they're going to be the fat cats in the safe places. The people who are in space suits on asteroid belts, chunking off big chunks of that with probably explosives, probably not going to be, the irreplaceables. I got to be honest, but that's the way that it works, right? That's the way it
Yeah.
is going to progress over time. Is you're going to end up with the Expanse, and there's going to be the Mars versus Earth fight. It's going to happen.
Well, you're going to have to, like, you don't want to admit it, but like we got to have a government on Mars eventually.
Yes, on Mars. Yeah. And eventually Mars is going to want to be independent of Earth. It's going to want to be, because Earth is going to extract. Then they're going to
charge us taxes.
Extract. And eventually Mars is going to say, why are we paying you all of our money when it's ours, right? And then Mars is going to revolt, and then Mars is going to become its own thing, and then Earth is going to fall apart a little bit because they don't have all the resources. Then Mars is going to become dominant. Then Mars has all the technology, and Earth kind of falls apart, and then like so on and so on and so forth.
I can't predict that far. You're.
I'm just looking at the sands of the sands of history, right? Like you can sift through the stories in history, and this is like look at England. England had all of its colonies, and it was extracting wealth from all of these colonies. And eventually the colonies are like, no, we're not going to do that anymore, right? So England fell down, right? And then its colonies gained ascendancy. Like, all of the former England, not all of them, but a lot of them did pretty dang well and better than England, actually, because they kept the wealth for themselves, right? I mean, even like Mexico and Spain, like you could say that Mexico fell down, but it didn't really. I mean, it has I don't know if it has a higher GDP, or I think it has a higher GDP than Spain does now, right? So economically, it's better than Spain. So, like, it's just in the history of mankind, this is what happens.
History rhyming, right? It's gonna
history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme, right? And that's kind of, I think, what we're looking at with space expansion, because people eventually, things are rough on Earth right now, and the pressure is pretty high. And people are going to want to escape and get some breathing room, right? Right now, there's nowhere you can go to get breathing room. It's just everything is under pressure. Like you could say, I'm going to go to Europe. No, Europe's under pressure. I'm going to go to Asia. Well, Asia's under pressure. I'm going to go to Russia, which is part of Asia. It's under pressure. I'm going to go to Africa. No, that's under pressure. You can't go anywhere. Like it's just a very high pressure situation. It's kind of a powder keg. Anyway, not talking about that. But anyway. I think people are eventually going to want to run for the hills, and Mars is going to be the hills at that point, right? And space is going to be the hills, where they can get distance from the controlling entities, right? Where they can like the reason why people came to America is they had the Atlantic Ocean between them and the authorities, and so they had a little bit of breathing room, right? And I think that's what's going to happen with Mars. Is eventually people are going to run for Mars because they get a little breathing room. Because, there may be some enforcement arm, but, at that point, it'll still take 3 months to go from Earth to Mars, right? Like, it's a long time. I mean, and you'll get a little breathing. And so the people that are going to go to Mars are going to be fairly independently minded, which means they're going to want to, declare their independence and do their own thing, right? So the battle between Mars and Earth is coming. I don't know if it's 100 or 200 or 300 years. Or
way to end our podcast. The battle is coming.
Here's the looming way is, unless we don't ever get to Mars because, nuclear holocaust, but
that's even worse.
I figured out a way to end it even better. All right, I'm going to end it. You ready for this?
Yep.
This episode of Doc Talk has been brought to you by Nuclear Holocaust, coming to an Earth near you. Be sure to tune in next time to the happiest podcast on the planet.